Hello crafty friends and welcome to my channel Create with Callia. I'm Callia. In today's video, I'm going to be scrapbooking using the July mystery envelope from the Inspiration Collaboration Design team. Our prompt was to use the mystery envelope to create a layout using photos from a festival, parade, gathering, or a reunion. The mystery envelope included these papers from the Country Woods collection and the Floral Charm collection, along with some charming shimmer faceted dots. I picked out these photos to scrapbook. I have three 4x6 photos and four photos that are just under 3 inches by 4 inches. I'm going to start this layout by bringing in 2 sheets of white willow cardstock. I'll be using those as my base for this layout. I've also already decided that I'm going to be using a flip flap and incorporating all three of the 4x6 photos on the left-hand side of my page. I'm going to lay out my 3x4 photos and decide on how I want those to look on the right-hand side of my page before I decide what I'm going to do with the papers that were in the mystery envelope. Lately, I've been feeling like I've been doing a lot of layouts where my photos are in a grid, and so I'm going to try to change things up just a little bit. I like this look of having the photos slid over just a little bit so that the photos aren't a stacked grid. And that leaves me 2 spots on my right-hand side page where I can put my embellishment clusters. When thinking about where to place my photos on the page, I look at the 2 photos where we're facing towards the left, and it makes sense to put those on the right-hand side of the page as though we're facing into the center of the page. I try to make the placement of the 2 lower photos on the right-hand side make sense by placing the photo of my husband on the far left where he's looking into the food container, and then placing the food container picture next to him. Now I'm ready to start bringing in the papers and deciding what I'm going to do with them. All of the papers that were included in the mystery envelope were cut down to a 4x6 size. I know that I still have a lot of the Country Woods collection in my stash, and so I think I'm going to be using that as my anchor paper for the bottom of my page. I'm going to use the other papers that were included from the Floral Charm collection to map my photos and to create my embellishment clusters. I'm starting to like the way that this placement is looking, but I feel like my photos need a darker map behind them to help them pop off the page. I'm going to use the opposite side of the Country Woods collection DSP, and that really helps the blues in my photo stand out. I've already used the print and cut feature in Cricut Design Space to cut out my title, and I'm going to place that on the upper left-hand side of my page to give myself an idea of where I want to place this photo cluster. I'm really liking the way that this looks and feel like the basic idea for my layout is starting to take shape. I'm ready to bring back in the Country Woods DSP that I wanted to use as my anchor for the bottom of my layout. I'm really liking this wood grain paper for the bottom of my layout, and then I'm also going to bring in some Misty Moonlight cardstock so that I'll be able to put a transition strip at the top of the paper. I'm happy with how the left-hand side of the page looks, so I move the papers over to the right-hand side and make sure that I'm also going to like them over there. I like the way this looks on the right-hand side as well, and so I think I have the basic design of my layout figured out. I'm ready to start cutting down my papers and my cardstock. I've cut 2 strips of the Country Woods DSP to 5.5 by 12 inches and then cut a 1/4 inch strip of Misty Moonlight cardstock. I've cut my photo mats out of the Misty Moonlight wood grain paper that's part of the Country Woods DSP. I cut one mat to 4.25 by 6.25, and then I cut 4 mats to 3 1/8 by 4 1/16. While cutting, I made sure to keep in mind that I want the direction of the wood grain running the same way on all of the pieces of DSP. I have them all oriented vertically. I'm going to adhere the photos to the mats and also adhere down my anchor papers, and then I'm going to come back to start building up my embellishment clusters. Unfortunately, my camera went out of focus here. I do apologize for that, but it will get better in just a moment. Now I'm starting to play around with how I want to place the remaining Country Woods and Floral Charm DSPs. I'm really liking this floral pattern from Floral Charm next to the pecan pie wood grain pattern from Country Woods. I also really like the pop of color that the Timid Tiger DSP from Floral Charm brings to this photo cluster. I think I have the basic idea of how I'm going to arrange the DSP behind this photo, so now I'm ready to start cutting down these papers. At the time that I was filming this video, I had not yet purchased any of the Floral Charm DSPs, So I needed to make sure to cut it down so that I would have enough to use for my entire layout. I tend to be a frugal crafter anyway, and so it's not uncommon for me to cut down papers like this so that I can save the leftovers for another project. I wanted approximately a half-inch border of the Floral Charm DSP showing, so I cut a border that was 3/4 of an inch, which would allow me enough room to adhere the Floral Charm DSP behind my photo. I cut the Country Woods wood grain at 1 1/4 inches so that I could have 1 inch of that pattern showing. I then cut down the Timid Tiger DSP to 5 1/2 inches by 4 inches, and then I also gut out the back of that. I make a pencil mark at the corners of where my photo is to help me figure out where I could remove excess papers to save for the rest of my project. The pictures that I chose to use for this layout are from a local family food truck night that my community has during the summer. Every Tuesday night from May through September, several food trucks gather at a park in my community to host this food truck night. These pictures are from the first time that we ever attended the food truck festival. It was fun to see the options that all of the different food trucks carried. My son wanted a pretzel, and my husband and I decided to get steak, macaroni and cheese, and bubble tea to try out at the festival. The festival also had live music, so we were able to spread a blanket out on the lawn and enjoy the music and our food. I've decided that my DSP is still looking a little flat on the page to me, so now I'm taking my Misty Moonlight ink pad and I'm inking around the edges of all of the pieces of DSP that I'm using to map my photos. Inking around the edges of the paper has really helped them to pop up off the page to me, so now I'm ready to start attaching my photos onto my layout. I've brought my title back in and I realize that it's not standing up off the page quite as much as I would like it to. The floral paper from Floral Charm has some mossy meadow in the pattern, and so I want to bring more of that mossy meadow green into my layout. I decided to use a Stampin' Spot and a blending brush to bring some more of the green into my layout by blending gently behind the 4x6 photo and in the spot where I'll be placing my title. I ink up the blending brush and make sure to dab it off a little bit so that I don't get harsh lines while I'm blending. I then make sure to bring some of the mossy meadow into my right-hand page as well. I place my photos back down in approximately the location that I plan to attach them to the page, and then I'll do some blending under and to the right of the rightmost photo and in the top left corner. This will bring some of the blending into the two areas where I plan to have embellishment clusters. I want to make sure that I have a spot for my journaling, so I cut down the remaining piece of Floral Charm to 3 1/8 by 4 1/16 to match the mats that I have on my photos, and also ink around the edge with Misty Moonlight. Now I'm ready to start embellishing. I start by bringing in the Adventure Together stamp set. I'm going to use the camper on this stamp set to represent the food trucks that were part of this festival. The stamp has a matching die, so I'm going to stamp in Tuxedo Black Memento ink, and then I'll use some of my Post-it note label tape to hold the die in place while I cut it out. Once my die cut is ready, I use the light Misty Moonlight Stampin' Blends marker to color in the awning. I then use my Smoky Slate Stampin' Write marker to color in the shelf, the inner part of the tire, and the fenders on the food truck. Next, I use the basic gray Stampin' Write marker to color in the tires. I use my Mossy Meadow Stampin' Write marker to color in the greenery that's part of the shelf. And last, I'm going to use both my light and my dark Pumpkin Pie Stampin' Blends to color in the other parts of the camper to make it look like a food truck. I don't currently have any markers in Timid Tiger, so that is why I chose to use the Pumpkin Pie Stampin' Blends. The orange of the pumpkin pie is close enough to Timid Tiger for me to use for these die cuts. As I mentioned, this layout is part of a collaboration with the Inspiration Collaboration Design Team. Make sure to watch until the end of this video where you'll be able to access the playlist where you'll be able to catch the projects made using the mystery envelope by the rest of the design team. Once I'm done coloring the food truck, I bring in my Spotlight on Nature dies and use one of the dies to cut a circle out of Mossy Meadow cardstock. I'm going to use that as a landing spot for the food truck die. Next, I bring in my Pop and Buy stamp set. I'm going to use the word enjoy as one of the embellishments for this layout. I'm also going to bring in the More Messages die set. This is currently one of my absolute favorite die sets. I love that you can cut out several different sizes and shapes of banners that you can use to create your word embellishments. Selecting just a few of the shapes at one time is also a great way to use up some of your scrap cardstock. Next, I'm going to bring in the Friendly Seagulls die set. I want to add some additional visual interest behind my title, and so I choose the stamp at the very bottom of the set that looks like rocks or pebbles. I'm on a mission to find alternate uses for some of my stamp sets and think outside the box. I felt like the space behind my title needed some additional interest, and this stamp set just happened to be sitting in my space and hadn't been used yet, so that's why I chose to use that. I do a little random stamping in Misty Moonlight behind where the title will be, and I'm happy with how that turns out. Next, I'm ready to start embellishing the right-hand side of my page. I bring in the scraps I cut previously and realize that using some banners on the right-hand side might be just the touch I need to incorporate all of the papers across my layout. I bring the word enjoy over to the right-hand side just to see if I'll want to incorporate a word embellishment there and realize that I prefer that in the new position. So I'm going to move that into my right-hand embellishment cluster. Next, I bring in a tab die from my Close to My Heart stash. I use that to cut some of the Timid Tiger and some of the Pecan Pie wood grain papers and use them to start working on my left-hand embellishment cluster. When I'm working on embellishment clusters, I like to make sure that I'm incorporating similar elements across all of the embellishment clusters on my layout. I realize that replicating the banners on the left-hand side of my page will help bring some cohesiveness to the layout, so I bring in some banners behind the circle. I felt like the left-hand embellishment cluster was still missing something, and bringing in the banners really helped it feel more complete. Next, I bring in the Sweet Jar stamp set. There's a stamp that says "A Little Treat for You," and I use another one of the More Messages banners to create a word sentiment to include in my embellishment cluster. Adding this last touch makes me feel like this embellishment cluster is finished. The mystery envelope included some charming shimmer faceted dots. I happen to have a full sheet of them, so I brought in the full sheet so that I can incorporate a lot of dots if I wanted to. I include some of the Night of Navy dots around my title and then bring some of the petal pink dots to the spot above my photo. You'll see that I end up moving the dots around the page a fair bit as I figure out where I'd like to place them. I tend to be a less is more type of person when creating some of my embellishment clusters, so I tend to like to have a larger cluster on the left-hand side of my layout, a smaller cluster in the middle, and then a larger cluster on the right to help me create my visual triangle. I feel like the two tabs plus some of the dots as my middle embellishment is just enough for this layout. You may have noticed that I've moved the petal pink dots around quite a bit and realized that I didn't like them at all in my middle embellishment cluster. I tend to use groups of 3 dots as I'm embellishing, as odd numbers tend to be visually pleasing. That principle doesn't always hold true, as you can see on the far right cluster where I did pair only 2 dots together. I'm going to move these Night of Navy dots one more time, and then at that point, I think my layout is complete. I've brought in a piece of white willow cardstock to represent where I will ultimately be putting my journaling on this page. A full list of all the supplies that I used to create this layout will be located in the description box, so please make sure to check that out. And here's the final result. I love that the pink and orange in the different papers matches my photos and the pink and orange hues in the sunset. The Misty Moonlight paper helps bring in the blue hues that are in all of my photos. I love the pop of color that the orange creates in all 3 of the embellishment clusters, and love that I was able to create so many of my embellishments out of one 4x6 piece of paper. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment. It helps me know which videos you are enjoying. You can catch the rest of the Inspiration Collaboration Design Team videos in the playlist here. Thanks for watching and craft on.